last night I debuted as the JV girls high school lacrosse announcer.
Ooh.
So
You have like a sportscaster voice. You're like, in this field.
I was like, welcome, Granville High School.
I love it.
Fantastic.
I love it.
Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about film, antiquity, and everything in between. I'm Colin McCormick.
And I'm Elijah Fleming.
And today we're talking about Orfeo Negro, or Black Orpheus, a 1959 romantic tragedy set in Rio de Janeiro during Carnival, directed by Marcel Camus. And joining us today is a very special guest I'm super excited about, Dr. Rebecca Futo Kennedy, Associate Professor at Denison University and the creative mind behind Classics at the Intersections. Hello, welcome, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm very excited. I'm sort of jealous that I didn't get to be on to do, the cartoon versions of everything, but
There's still time, and so you were one of the ones I first plugged, I think, for that when we started doing this. I was like, I definitely want Rebecca on the show.
Yeah, you wrote me, and then we dropped the ball on it for a long time.
I know. Well, that happened with everyone. We're finally coming back around because a similar thing happened with Joel, where I sent him an email sort of right away, and then I forgot to follow up 7 months later or something.
Well, when you guys, I'll come back on when you guys finally get into your anime phase.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
well, the Thermi Romi is floating around. We gotta talk Thermi.
Oh, I need to see it. I haven't watched
you haven't
it.
Seen it? I have a bootleg version from Japan that I bought.
Oh, I might tap you for that because I can't find there's the live action movie and I can't find a copy of it.
I have the live action film.
Oh, fantastic! Yes. I'll edit out the part where you say it's illegal.
Actually, I got it from Asia now, so it's not fully bootleg.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Excellent. But we'll start with Rebecca with our opening question always is, and it's kind of a loaded question because we always complicated, but do you dig this movie and what's your experience sort of with Black Orpheus?
Yeah, I actually really love this movie. My favorite part of the movie is actually the opening sequence. I just adore the music. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And just sort of I love that opening scene, right, where you have the sort of the white statue and just busts through it. And you get this sort of vibrancy and this. I just really think that it's a really clever and I just really love how that starts off, and the music is really attractive to me, and I also really like the way that they sort of filter it down into Eurydice, right, mm-hmm. and you're sort of confused and unsure how to deal with this environment, and how they really. I think, 1959, and this film is absolutely showing explicitly the sort of type of harassment that women have mm-hmm. to endure on the street. And of course, the whole thing is sort of, you find out, right, is premised on this idea that she's being stalked by death, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things I really love in it, particularly, but I just, that opening scene just sort of, and the music just sort of grabs you right in and pulls you in a way that it's you're in for a good ride.
Yeah, the music is one of the most, I think, noteworthy or memorable parts of this film. I want to get into that a lot. I have a lot of thoughts about it.
I wonder sometimes if the opening scene is actually a callback to, a call out of, in some mm-hmm. ways, Leni Riefenstahl's Olympia. The opening where they've got the Myron's Discobolus, and then it sort of melds into the German athlete.
Yeah.
And moves in through, and it would be to me a really remarkable statement if it is in fact.
Like what you were just saying, just that stark contrast between the kind of bleak whiteness of the relief and then the vibrant color. Because this movie, 1959, color, Technicolor and stuff has been around for a while, but a movie this colorful is, I think, noteworthy in and of itself.
Vibrant, just really super vibrant.
Yeah, everybody's incredibly the whole, and then the Carnival scene especially. But I'm gonna pivot to Eli. Was this your first time?
This was my first viewing of this movie. I had
baby.
I know. I had heard of this movie, and it was sort of in the back of my head, but I don't think I had ever even watched a trailer before mm-hmm. I saw this. And so that first scene when it breaks through, it was kind of I jumped back. It was oh my gosh, this is awesome. And it's your heart starts beating with all of that music. And I was like, yes, awesome, thank you. And it was like every little part of that, the very first scene where they're like going up the hill, it's like, I want to be there. It's like, I want to be like dancing with all these people. I want to be having fun with these kids flying the kite. So yeah, I did really dig parts of this movie. And I think I do have maybe complicated feelings about its reception maybe later, but I love the kind of magical realism that went along with all of this, and it sort of gave me like a 100 Years of Solitude vibes.
Yeah, it has. I think like particularly like kind of in the end, like when you get into the more mythy part of it really becomes very like nice.
I loved the entire chase scene, and I love the figure of death. And I definitely want to come back and talk about that for sure.
Yeah,
he was a soccer player, I think.
Well, he's some sort of like athlete, right?
He's
I think many of the actors in the film were not actually actors.
Yeah, some of them were. Well, so Marpessa Dawn Eurydice, she's actually American born French. Yeah, she was born in I think Pittsburgh. Moved to France. Later married Marcel Camus, the director.
What?
Mm-hmm. And
okay.
but like Breno Melo or Orpheus, he's Brazilian. I think some of them there was like an experimental. I think it was played up in some of the like later reviews and critiques that it was like these are sort of like just actual those like people, but some of them I think were like experimental theater troupe, but some of them I think were just people. I'm looking at Adamar da Silva. He was a triple jumper.
Wild.
Yeah. But yeah, so I had a couple like talking points unless someone wants to hijack it from me. But the first was just kind of thinking about this because like Eli, I think you were getting at what I was reading about is because this I dig this movie too, but I think there's also this movie is I dig it in two ways. Like one, I think I just surface level enjoy the movie, but I also really dig like thinking about it, particularly now, and thinking about it in terms of both sort of like film reception of classical studies, all the conversations we're having now in classics and humanity, sort of broadly about like race and colorism and post-colonialism and things like that, and like mapping it on, and then the reception, looking at this movie after now it's been something like 50 years. And like one of the things that I think a lot of film critics, or at least I was reading and receptions, is that this film was huge when it came out. It's won like Palme d'Or, Academy Awards and Golden Globes, BAFTAs. And it was such a huge breakout film. But it was also it was primarily like it was by an international production company. Like it's a French, primarily direction and production.
Italian.
And Italian. It's like French, Italian, and Brazilian. And it's sort of primarily it's Brazil, and it exposed the wider world to a lot of sort of Brazilian culture. But then is this like a sort of reduction, or is it did it create a sort of stereotyping now that sort of like permeated longer?
Yeah, I think some of the criticisms that I think I've also read is the sort of exoticizing of this community, or just like Carnival in itself, or like the sort of the Afro-Brazilian, religious trends and figures like we're seeing at the end, sort of in the Hades thing, and sort of is that responsibly portrayed, and like maybe today we would say no. So yeah, I felt a little conflicted about that toward the end.
Yeah, but I would just say the one thing is that I'm not a person. I'm not sure if any of us are the people to judge whether it was
absolutely
right?
not.
Like without having that sort of actual cultural lens to know whether it's sort of an accurate one. And so I think that's actually what's super interesting about it, right? Is that this is going to read to different communities in different ways. And I have colleagues and friends who are in Brazil, but they're indigenous and European. They're not Black Brazilian. But Brazil's racial divides and racial structures actually work very differently than those in the United States and other places. So it's an interesting thing to think about, that this is a film where you have to actually take it in so many different levels, and you have to actually acknowledge so much ignorance.
Yes, absolutely.
About the positionality of it.
At the end, like if you don't know what Candomblé is, the whole like Hades scene is going to be like, what is going on? Kind of.
That's like you're like on Google.
Yeah. And it was also like this film kind of like everything to what Rebecca just said. Like that's absolutely right. There's a really interesting kind of like in about like the different, like the way this film is received by different audiences. Like Obama like writes in his memoirs about like his mother was like super excited about this film, and he had this like weird, it's a sort of a long passage that I tracked down, but it's just like very interesting to think about like the way like the appeal of this movie to Obama's mother versus the way it sat uneasily with him, the way he kind of describes it in that way. But like this film, well, not like directly, but like very soon after this film in like the 60s, Brazil's going to go through, I mean, a bunch of stuff. But this is part of this modernization of Brazil period. They moved the capital from Rio to Brasilia. We're 5 years away from a military dictatorship, but there's a cinema movement in Brazil that happens right after the Cinema Novo that's almost kind of a reaction to this kind of thing.
Yeah, I found the quotation from Obama thing that gets to it a bit, right? So he says, I said, quote, "I suddenly realized that the depiction of the childlike blacks I was now seeing on the screen, the reverse image of Conrad's dark savages, was what my mother had carried with her to Hawaii all those years before, a reflection of the simple fantasies that had been forbidden to a white middle-class girl from Kansas, the promise of another life, warm, sensual, exotic, different."
I mean, and that's his, I mean, like you were also testifying like the different sort of racial politics and cultural structures in America versus Brazil, but the way of...
Yeah. And I mean, you know, just the difference between, you know, being black in America and say someone from the Caribbean or someone from Brazil proper, but also this idea that like, are they childlike? I don't find the figures childlike. I find them actually quite rich in many ways. So I would dispute this idea that they're being represented as childlike or savage. And
it's a very like maybe philic kind of approach, which I'm like is open to criticism in and of itself. But like there generally seems to be like a warmth to the way these characters are. I mean, particularly I'm thinking of actually like Benedito and Zeca and the children. And like my all-time favorite scene in this movie is the very end. And also just the motif with the playing to make the sun rise, I just like love.
Yes, I love that.
That's a really clever way to filter in this sort of tradition of Orpheus as, right?
Yeah.
As the musician.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to build off of that just a little quickly. Is that I think that sometimes people mistake the idea of play as childish. And this idea that there can be people in the world who can really truly enjoy play and be adults is, for some people, they don't get it. And I find that sad.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's such an important distinction, and I really love that. Yeah, because this certainly seemed
it goes like, to my idea that people who interpret, why is it that people who read comedy for a living often give us the most boring interpretation?
One of my old professors told me, it was like in linguistics, he's like, never go to a conference about like humor. You would think that they'd be like really fun because it's like people, you know, cracking jokes all the time, but it's like, no. It's people dissecting jokes and thus like
I wonder how
people.
many film critics like miss the point of play in a film like this, and the sort of joyousness of that play that Carnival provides. You know, it provides an outlet for people who may, you know, living in a favela who may not have the opportunities to experience, you know, a life that is filled with play.
Yeah. But just such like a human desire, right? It's such and that energy that I feel like there was such an energy through the whole movie that really felt that sort of like feverish desire to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, is it that scene in particular where he's going to get his guitar out of the pawn shop, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's lined up pawning something for this, you know, they're going to go get it back later because they're going to work and they're going to make it because they have to. But for this one time, they want to have a beautiful costume. They want to have fun. And they want to sort of let loose, and they're willing to give up. It's all these mundane things from their lives, like right, it's like I'm bringing in my radio, I'm bringing in, you know, like like sort of like bringing in your appliances to see if you can get some money for it, so you can have some fun for a bit, and then you'll go buy it back later. In some ways, he has the opposite, right? Because he sells this thing that brings him joy before Carnival and is able to get it back in time for Carnival.
And I just wanted to plug on, you mentioned just the costumes alone, like the whole, and like the dresses. And then that's also, that's what, I mean, Carnival kind of does look like they have these, if you look now, I mean, now this is a little bit before I think they built the Sambodrome, like the big sort of runway but they have these like incredible floats, and all the costumes and the dancing and the samba schools. the way they kind of compete like that. But I mean, yeah, like we were like the way this myth, even like with the way the Orpheus myth with the guitar, like the way this movie I think blends the tropes of the myth, and we should say this is based first on a play, although it departs in some big ways. Orfeo de Conceição, I think, is the play, but the way like the fact that he's like I like this motif of like a reincarnated Orpheus, like there's always an Orpheus that gets passed down, which I like also doubly because it's sort of, maybe that's just me because I'm preferential to happy endings in some, not always, but I like that, you know, because Orpheus, like there's no like I like towards the end I like almost forgot, I'm like, oh right, Orpheus can't survive this.
He can't live.
No, there's no neither. I think the myth, the archetype that he's sort of in, does not allow it. But then there gets to be another Orpheus in Zeka, I think is the kid's name.
Yeah, and they even say that. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
You're Orpheus now, right?
You're Orpheus now. Like, here we go. Let's do it.
And there's almost like a necessity, like the way the kids like. There needs to be an Orpheus, almost like, because in their sense, like otherwise the sun won't rise or something like that. But like this sort of underlying like the necessity of an Orpheus figure like existing.
Well, yeah, because it's like I think the sort of the undertones that run throughout, sort of not even undertones, the overtones that run throughout the film of sort of like sexual harassment and sort of that sort of a little bit the sort of aggressive culture that Orpheus, he's someone who participates in it, but he is at first represented as a little creepy, but then like he sort of becomes endearing to people, and you see him as a sort of harmless in his stuff, except for his obvious relationship with Mira, which is not good. But it's this idea that he in some ways maybe resembles or he represents play and fun and the sort of lightheartedness, but the seriousness. Like play can be very serious. It has a very important role in the world, and there needs to be an Orpheus because there needs to be that way to access that part of ourselves that he and his music and that sort of represents to people. So I would say sort of like, you know, this is why I sort of distinguish this idea of play versus childishness, right? Because play is very serious and important. Like, what's the big thing we've all learned in lockdown that we need to get out?
Yeah.
We need to even, you know, that little things like, you know, going for a walk or shooting hoops outside or something, right?
Yes.
There's somehow that we need this sort of thing in our lives that can give us an outlet. Which is, I guess, you know, kind of why people. How many podcasts like started?
I know. Well, mine coincided very neatly, or not neatly, but very close to my 30th birthday, which I think also might have something to do with it.
Also that moment where you're sort of like self-realization.
My friend texted me and he's like, "You've completed the like apotheosis of like white men in their 30s. You're podcasting now." I was like, "Yeah."
Well, just wait. When you turn 40, you'll wake up one day and every bone in your body will hurt.
Oh, that's all right.
You'll get trifocals.
Oh, no.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
I mean, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
Well, so then do we think that like the opposite of play is death, and that sort of like when we stop playing is maybe that the death that's kind of haunting us?
I don't know. I mean, I think the opposite of play in this film is the girlfriend.
Oh yeah.
Mira, right?
Yeah.
And she's supposed to stand in for the women, the Thracian women, right?
Yeah, the Maenads and the Bacchans.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of lingering danger of because you know, Serafina, she's like embodiment of fun and play as well. I think her character is actually my favorite character.
I was about to say if I didn't already say that. If I didn't say Zeka but Benedito right away, but like Serafina is my close runner-up because all the scenes with her are like delightful.
It's so true.
Everything with and Shiko, her boyfriend, that he's like a sailor or a soldier or something like that comes home, and then the whole
their relationship is a little distressing. I'm not gonna lie, but you know. She's one who like grabs life, you know.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and she's the catalyst for much of this.
I mean, I guess I would say that for it's not necessarily that I don't know if death is the opposite, but that it's really I don't know, maybe it's work, maybe it's like sort of traditional structures, right? Because trying to make him marry her, right? And this sort of rejection of that kind of containment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's telling. I think even it works thematically, not both. It works like on multiple levels, just that they set this around basically in like the day before and after, like the 3 days surrounding Carnival, and that like as like a point, as a period of just like unfettering of any sort of strictures or structures, and just kind of like, I'm losing my train of thought because my brain breaks sometimes. But like it's like Orpheus as this figure of play and revelry and like Dionysian type indulgence in that Carnival, like good, like lines hand in hand with that. But then also the almost like otherworldliness, and like, because this is, I mean, I think that this movie's like not really shying away from it. It's like it's very mythic. It's very kind of almost surreal or fairy tale. It's got a magical element to the whole thing.
The magical realism.
Exactly. Yeah. And the fact, like, the death figure, like, it's never explained. I don't need it to be.
No,
it's just
exactly.
Death.
I love that it's not explained. I love that we don't really know at some point, like, is he like a real man that is stalking her, or is he just in a costume and he's, playing along?
Or even visible to others.
Yeah, because I think the kids see him, or at least one of them does. But
again, is this a process of the way that children can still see?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And he does, like, I think, interact a little bit with, like, people around, but he's, like, hanging on the side of the ambulance or something. He's, like, not in the car. And so, yeah, he's just this, like, very real feeling threat. I feel like all women have had that, like, feeling of somebody is following me, but it's also this, like, almost like, what is following you? Or is it,
as you're talking, I was just thinking about this idea too, that is this feels in some ways, right, like a coming of age for Eurydice. So like she's moving from sort of, if you take this sort of, sorry, I'm just like going to connect all the things that you guys have just said together really quickly. But
that's
like,
why we bring you on, because we get too in our own heads.
Sort of like 3-day period, right, where we're transitioning, in and out of the world of play. And you have the children as sort of a lens for us to sort of view this world through, and to view this transition through, and to view the role of Orpheus through, and then how she transitions from like coming here. Like, this is maybe the first, someone on my farm, some man on my farm said he was going to kill me, right? She comes, she's all in white, like including the white pumps, which like walking around on those hills with those white pumps is like a brave act.
Yes.
You're crazy, right? But then there's that moment, of course, where she takes after she's had sex, right? Because then, of course, she has sex with Orpheus, and this is the move to her adultness. And then you have the scene where Seraphina gives her the gold dress with the veil, and she very intentionally hangs the white dress up on a door, and it's sort of as putting it away. You've put away the things of childhood, right? And you've embraced the things of adulthood. And then we have the death scene. And of course, I think this plays into a lot of the ways that myths themselves play with the act of marriage, or women sexually progressing as a sort of death. Yeah. And so she feels that adulthood and that sort of transition lingering behind her potentially. Only she and the children can see it, because only she and the children, potentially actually recognize it for what it is. But she's so close now to the edge that she can't see it anymore, because she's in that transition period. And she transitions, and just like in every horror movie, every girl who has sex dies. So I think
this is a movie I didn't think I was going to reference, but everything you kind of said, I don't know if you ever saw It Follows, has a very similar.
Yes,
oh, this is a horror movie that like actually stayed with me. It freaked me out, but it really.
When was this movie made?
A couple years ago, I'd say. Like,
I'd given up horror films, when I was like 20.
I want to say like 2017 or maybe even earlier.
Yeah, maybe my children have seen it.
I have the internet right here. I suppose I could just look.
No, it really like sticks with that. It's like it's a sexually transmitted haunting.
Oh.
So it's the characters who like get this haunting when they have like a one night stand, and it's this.
So it's playing with that sort of horror film trope, but
it's the way it's shot. It feels very dreamlike. Like it's deliberately like that. Like you're not. It's supposed to feel like you're in a dream, and
it's disturbing.
Yeah, but it has a very similar kind of motif there, and it's just like the monster basically like it walks slowly but like unstoppably towards you, and so you just see it coming, and you can like move away, but it eventually like catches up, and it's just this like,
and nobody else can see it. It's like
Yeah.
it's only coming after you.
yeah, unless
Yeah,
you're
that-
in the like chain or something like that.
Yeah,
Or-
yeah.
I also wonder, like, since you've brought this up as well, is now that I have a new horror film to be horrified at, if I have ever asked to watch it, because of shy away. But the whole catabasis for Orpheus in the film, it seems to me too that we're set up to like recognize that Orpheus too has now lost his innocence, right, and his ability to play, and that he will never again be able to really be Orpheus.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, he can't play.
Like,
he can't play in both
the
senses.
inevitability of the transmission of his spirit or whatever, that the music has to move on, because he's now in some ways a requirement of being Orpheus is joy,
Mm-hmm.
and he's now experiencing grief, and can he emerge from that grief? And our myth tells us no,
Yeah.
right? And the myth, he never emerges from that grief, right?
And he says so himself. I forget exactly what he says, but something to the effect of like, it's I can't.
Yeah.
And like that whole catabasis scene, I was like getting really excited. Just like with like the missing persons department, and it's just
all the rooms full of paper.
Yeah, and nobody's in there. It just fills up with paper. And there's just always paper, but no people, and the paper can't tell you any answers. And it was like, and that shot where he's walking down the staircase, and it's red at the bottom, and it's just all in the dark, just all the staircases and him moving down.
Yeah, I love that because of the like bits of reality. Like if you are missing somebody who is probably dead, and sort of like, what are they actually going to do? All of this, bureaucratic red tape might feel like it's just rooms full of paper and nobody's going to find this person for you. But it's like the idea that like that is some sort of afterlife or underworld is horrifying. It was so empty and sad, and I really felt that.
That's like the third circle of hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's like the Lost or whatever.
Yeah, I think that scene is probably and his interaction with the janitor is probably for me one of the more powerful moments in the whole grief process.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it feels helpless and completely useless to even try. But I also I wonder if there is a contrast here that's being made between different cultures, right, and different sort of ways of imagining in Brazilian. The way that in Brazil and France and Italy, like they're very different cultures, but Brazil is this sort of very strange, very different sort of structures, but paper and bureaucracy and paperwork are like very European things.
Mm-hmm.
We would call them white people things, but in the 59, the very European thing and it gets you nowhere, right? It's a dead end.
And that building itself is very like kind of neoclassical-esque.
Well, and then the what's his, I don't remember his name, but the guy at the morgue who's like, if you want to leave her here as a cadaver for us to use for learning for the university students, right? And it's from what I've been told by some of my friends who live in Brazil, right? There's university has been traditionally very European structure within Brazil, and so I think there's something to be said for the way that it's pointing to a sterility, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that white freezer, the white locker freezer room where she is like exactly what you're saying. Very. And the
stacks of paper.
Yeah.
I wonder if also I was going to come back to it, but even just in the scene with Eurydice's death, is that it's Orpheus is the one who kills her effectively, right? Because he turns on the lights, and that's what does it. And I was like, I'm like, there's something to it. There's something to this, but I've yet to wrap my mind around, because that, like you said, like he's the sort of his presence, like ushering her through this journey from sort of into maturity and then after and then death. But like, so he's the one who sort of brings her into this world, but then also is her killer in a sense.
I would go back to Eli's point about who is death and what is death, right? I don't think death himself can do the killing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if he's part of the imaginary and not real. He can only facilitate and lead them to that path.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's the thing that drives her to Rio. He's the thing that drives her to Orpheus. He's the thing that drives her to all of these actions. Is that fear, right? So I would go back to your point, Eli, about
Yeah. Well, and it's like she's, climbing off to get away from him, and that's the reason why she's hanging on to it. Yeah. So I do wonder, he doesn't seem like Death could have actually done the deed or stabbed or however, whatever we might imagine.
It's like that prophecy determinism thing. Like, if you had not done anything, would it have...
If you know anything from ancient myths or Greek tragedies.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's the Oedipus conundrum all over again.
Right. Well, there's the scene, like, I think the thing that, going back to sort of Death and the costume and the sort of self-consciousness of the film about him being in a costume and how we're supposed to read that is and also about whether or not, he's real and can kill her, is that the first scene when she runs away from him and Orpheus finds her and she falls on him and then passes out.
Mm-hmm.
And you see him holding a knife, right? Mm-hmm. And I wonder, because I was like, did she fall on the knife? Right? Like, did he stab her and now she's fainted? But Death then turns away and takes the mask off, as he's going. And he does it the first time she sees him when she's in Serafina's house.
Yeah.
And he sees him behind the door, and as he turns, he takes the mask off. Mm-hmm. That's the face he shows her, but it's this very sort of fourth wall.
Yeah.
Self-consciousness about the theatricality of the moment that I think is playing. The film is intentionally playing with not just myth, but with tragedy, and the performative nature of itself. But I do wonder if we're set up in that first scene where Orpheus goes to save her when he's holding the knife and holding it in a way that looks like he could have in fact accidentally stabbed her, but doesn't. If we're set up at that moment for the knowledge that he's going to be the one who does it,
right? This tragic foreshadowing. Yeah. Oh, it's just so many levels. I think Death was my favorite part of this.
Yeah, I think the first time I saw that movie, I showed that movie. It was the first time I saw it. I showed it to students back in 2003.
Yeah. What did they like? What did they think about it?
Yeah.
But I was teaching. It was to the summer of 2002, maybe, because I was teaching a summer mythology course, but I was teaching it at an extension campus for OSU, not at the main campus. And so I had 12 students. It was for a teacher education program. And so this was one of the courses they could take to fulfill their secondary school requirement. And I remember showing the film as part of we did a lot of film, because who wants to be in a trailer, in the middle of nowhere, Ohio for 3 hours, twice a week in order to get the credit hours in the summer. Right? So I was like, let's watch some movies. But one of the students in the class was a evangelical Christian who had been raised homeschooled. And she had been raised to believe that anybody who wasn't Christian or didn't, quote unquote, know Jesus was going to hell. And this class, she wrote me afterwards and said that, that what she realized while taking this class is that how could people know Jesus when Jesus didn't exist? But it was a sort of
this stumped the medieval theologians, but
right?
the answer is to retcon that they were. But
yeah, but I mean, so you sort of think about the ways that Plato and Platonic thought gets incorporated into early Christianity as a way to sort of circumvent this problem, or Virgil becomes
yeah, Dante's all the cool people.
But I sort of think about that in terms of showing a film like this or showing other films. I tended to show foreign films as a sort of mythical reception. That how that must have sort of been for someone who thought that people who wrote these myths were evil, right? And then having to sort of experience it through this new lens as a part of a program to be able to teach high school, which she had never experienced herself. And so you sort of put this in line with the storyline of this movie. And it's
I like where this is going.
Well, I'm just sort of thinking about, this is how this film functions as a sort of coming of age and sort of, enlightenment or having to traverse the sort of evils in order to come out somewhere else. And I think that's where we end with the children at the end of the thing, that life goes on and life still has joy in it. And, when will they go through this too? So it's just a coincidence as we were talking that I thought about, that's actually the first time I ever taught this film. I actually had a student who sort of went through this catabasis of their own.
And even just like at the meta level of like what's going on with Eurydice and the characters of like, they're like everything you're just saying about this like like these new experiences, journey into a new strange world and then coming out of it sort of at the other end. But like this film itself as a vehicle for just like how many, I mean, it's kind of like for the criticisms that we or others could levy at it, but like this film just exposed people to like something totally new and different, which I think is part of its sort of staying power as a film. And also it's just like all these scenes are incredibly compelling. I remember when there's like a clip I really, really love. I really like so Bong Joon-ho is like one of my favorite filmmakers. And that's not just like jumping on the Parasite bandwagon. I was here since The Host, but
Okay,
yeah, that's Nick. But there's a great like little video clip of him and he's going to the Criterion Collection. He's getting to like pick out some DVDs for himself and he picks out a bunch of movies and he's like, oh, I saw this when this time. And like, cause he's just kind of like a film nerd who loves movies, which I love. And he picks out Black Orpheus and he's like, I remember seeing this as a kid on Korean TV when I was young. And just like that kind of like the way this movie sort of like the wings that it grew, so to speak, you know, to cop on Ovid or something, but.
I love that. I had not heard that before. That's crazy.
I was going to say my other, just like, there's like little parts I could just go through, like little touches I love about this movie. But one of them is just Orpheus's his shed. When we first really hear Orpheus play, and he's in his with the kids, and then all the animals like come out, and I'm like, that's the most Orpheus thing ever.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the goat. Like hangs out in his house all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, that puppy and the kitten.
Or yeah, there's that little cat that's just like running around in the background at one point.
But goats really sort of bring home the sort of you know, because of course you get, I think you do get some sort of bucolic vibes right from this.
Yes.
With him in particular. I remember introducing one of my students to Daphnis and Chloe, and this poor student had never seen, you know, fainting goats, had never seen goats in trees, and so I thought I had to introduce her to the joys of the internet.
Goats that scream like men is my favorite.
There's something about goats that evokes Greekness.
Yeah,
truly.
The Greek landscape, right, is the goat. So I love that there's this like goat just sort of like always around.
I love it.
I was jumping around because so music is we've danced around it, but the music one of the other things is this movie sort of exposed people to was not just like Brazilian sort of people and culture, but the music. And like this movie was, I think, a big catalyst for bossa nova because it's Antonio Carlos Jobim and Luis Bonfa who are two big, did the music, and they were like bossa nova. There's an interesting relationship between like samba and bossa nova. Samba is like the genre. I think historically it comes from like Bahia, which is like a historically sort of poorer, blacker part of Brazil. And it's got all these roots in like all these different indigenous and West African. And then bossa nova is like of the more commercialized, for lack of a better word. It's kind of apolitical. It's elevator. It's literally like the elevator. Yeah. No, being apolitical is political, right? I took a course once in college, so I'm an expert, obviously. But it was about Brazilian music, but it's talking about this kind of switch, this like bait and switch that Brazil did around the 50s and 60s, where it almost like, this is a probably poor analogy, but like similar to the way like Elvis's rock and roll was to say blues and jazz, is sort of bossa has a similar relationship where bossa was more popular among white audiences and had like a wider sort of
I find that really interesting because, you know, of course, what's happening in France in 1959 and 1950s generally around the issues of race, I think has to be factored into this, right? Because we have, after World War II, we have the sort of big anti-racist movement from UNESCO, and France essentially writes race out of its history. Like, right, race doesn't exist. It's a social. They took the idea of race as a social construct to mean race doesn't exist. And so, like, even today, you still see repercussions of it, right? If you sort of look at what's happening in France today and their sort of rejection of American style, you know, race discussions. It's like, you gave us Futo, it's your fault. But there's you know, this whole the whole way that anti-racism sort of crafted itself in France as a sort of erasure and the invention of color blindness, I think really sort of informs the film in ways that you sort of have to be conscientious of, right? Because you do have what is this sort of like predominantly black cast. Then you have like, right, Camus himself appears in the film as the guy who like takes, is he the what is his character? Is he the butcher?
He's Ernesto. I have that, but I'm trying to remember who that is. He's not the clerk, is he?
Portuguese shop owner or something who like
yes, with all the
he takes
the women
for credit, like right. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a sort of really super racialized scene, and I just wonder how much of that sort of colorblind ideology is like sort of infecting the film
Mhm.
in ways that isn't just like cultural difference, but it's actually an attempt to sort of erase race
Mhm.
throughout the film in a way that is particularly French in that time period.
Yeah. No, I think that's the best thought. I really like that.
Yeah.
And there's there's also the other lens we kind of touched on, but there is also this like extra, like, in addition to like race and anti-racism talking to them, but there's like a feminist reading, I think, that's kind of lies right over where we talk about like the fear and that sort of dread that Eurydice inhabits. And the way Orpheus, in the beginning I was very unsure about how to feel about Orpheus, because he's like openly,
hey, come on board.
Yeah, in front of his fiance, and he's like Tina's like, oh, how beautiful her eyes are.
Yeah.
Like, as Mira's trying to be like
his fiance, and you're like, he doesn't want to marry you.
Mhm.
Everybody knows he doesn't want to get married.
Yeah. Seraphina's there, like she's running interference the whole time.
I
And she's
know.
like,
From the
"Come meet my cousin."
beginning. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I like, but that scene actually, that opening scene when he comes by, in the whatever you call it, those little cars that move.
The trolley thing.
The trolley.
Yeah, I live in Ohio. We don't have public transportation, so I wouldn't know a trolley if I saw one. Like, what are these things that the public pays for and they move around roads?
You could just ride them and get to where you need to go.
Like, between living in Ohio and Southern California, like, I wouldn't know public transportation if it ran me over. But that scene is like really disturbing, right? So she's like sort of bouncing around, and she gets caught amongst a group of dancers who keep like heading her off, and not letting her out of the space. And finally, an older Black woman dances through and dances her out of the circle, and then goes back in and takes over the spot herself. But then she, like, Orpheus, tells her, hey, beautiful, or whatever the phrase he uses, get on. And she turns away, and she's like, no, right? And she goes, and then someone else totally randomly on it, like, literally abducts her, right, and puts her on.
Yeah.
I was watching with my partner, and she was like, when that happened, she's like, did that guy just like grab her onto the train? Because that's that's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that really
Rumors are not unfounded.
Exactly.
No.
It really speaks to this just like, a very like common fear that I feel like all women have had, and just like walking down the street, and then the more like ambiguous fear of death sort of like following that. I think it really built that up for me.
But ironically, right? I think importantly, actually, I wouldn't say ironically, I would say importantly, the first male figure that she engages, that she doesn't have, like, that she's scared of initially and then stops, is he's blind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
He can't see her, and so she feels released by that in some ways, right?
Exactly.
She's not subject to his gaze. And so, which of course also, like, thinking about, again, French cinema of the 50s, and like this, they're examining this idea of the gaze, and how that works, right? So I think there's all that stuff going on. There's also, of course, the film has colorism in it, right? She's the light-skinned Black woman who everyone sort of admires, right, with her white dress and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. Even though, of course, Mira has the full Europeanized, Maria outfit.
I wonder if our what's the word I'm looking for? Like contrarian, or like our hot take is that this is secretly a horror masquerading as a tragedy.
Yes, absolutely.
I can get behind that.
There's I think there's a different version of this movie that is just a pure horror film.
And I think, and then you sort of package it in this like really super vibrant and joyful, colorful, musical package.
Yeah.
That really maybe speaks to the sort of underlying horror of life. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's, again, like, to go back to Greek tragedy, that's it. That's Bacchae right there. That's like the danger and the joy.
How much joy is there ever in Bacchae?
I think somewhere someone's having fun.
Somebody was having fun somewhere.
Yeah, that's we need the like Tom Stoppard like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, but for Bacchae, where it's just two people hanging out at a festival.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, did you hear? The king got ripped apart. Crazy.
I want that so much.
Cool, right. That's the little home project we're gonna build. I'm just gonna do a Tom Stoppard for every major play in Greekish. That's a good that'd be a good. It's like there's like a genre. I don't know how to describe it. Or like I'm thinking of like Two Medieval Monks, but like it's not quite like that. But it's people on the sidelines narrating like major
events,
like works of literature or something like that.
You guys, the Best in Show version.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
The commenter and the color commentary on the side.
Oh please.
What's his name? Fred.
Fred Willard.
Fred Willard, yeah. We need it's like, and so the Mayflower, the Mayflower Pilgrims. There is the Nina, the Pinta. And like,
well, this brings me back to my debut yesterday as a high school girls lacrosse JV announcer. Because it was practice. There was a lot of comedy going on, incidental or not. But a lot of parents yelling up from the stands like, that wasn't a check. What kind of call is that? And so today, one of my friends was like, her daughter's one of the more aggressive players on the team was like, yeah, this is why I could never be the announcer. You'd be like, what kind of call is that on Grab It? That was a clean hit. And then my other friend's like, we need a color commentator in addition to an announcer. I was like, I can get behind that. Yeah. I think this is what we need. Because who really cares about JV? Like, you need to spice it up somehow.
Limitless comic potential in like sort of low to no stakes youth athletics, and like the parents, and like if I had a nickel for like in rec soccer or something for every like poor teenage ref who's just like volunteering from like the high school soccer team getting yelled at by some parent.
Like his parent who is convinced that someday their kid is going to be pro and they're like 8.
Yeah, the guy's just like, I work for like $8. Like, man, it's like
for the entire match, $8.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just doing this as a favor to my coach. Like, I don't need parents yelling at me.
My gosh.
Right. Yeah, but I think there's a genre, to be had of this. I mean, it all goes back to Mystery Science Theater, 2000 or whatever it was when it first came out.
Yeah.
Which came out when I was in like high school. I think it was when it started. But I think there's something to be said for a revival of that format, but with a different movie type.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, your show kind of is that. I mean, we could like always just like show clips. Like you could like convert that.
I got that. I'm behind on editing. We had a Quo Vadis episode that I was supposed to get at today, but it hasn't happened. But when our Spartacus episode, I got a little too trigger happy with like the "I'm Spartacus" quote. And like anytime we say "I'm Spartacus," I'm like "I'm Spartacus." So I put a new one in there.
Well, there's so many things you can like sound bites and things you can get off the internet these days. Yeah. You need it just on a button.
I was joking with someone like I really just need to invest in like a soundboard to just have like a bunch of like a radio, like one of those like
keyboard.
Yeah, like shock jock radio types. Like, to have like 1,000,000,001 fart sounds.
When I was a kid, Casio keyboards first came out and were like a thing, and everybody wanted one. And my best friend got one for Christmas one year. I think I was like 8 or maybe 10. And the demo song was Never Gonna Give You Up.
Oh no!
That's amazing.
And so there was like a period of my life where I was like, damn, I wish I had that Casio keyboard.
I know. that keyboard was like 30 years ahead of its time.
I love it.
Way ahead of its time.
I love it.
Something recently, I forget what it was. I saw a fantastic Rickroll. It was on like a public service something, or like I forget what it was.
I actually attempted at a bet from a friend of mine to Rickroll the world repeatedly. I videotaped, I recorded interviews for a History Channel series called Clash of the Gods. And I was supposed to record for the Zeus episode in addition to a bunch of other ones. But due to some sort of flight problems and everything, I didn't get there early enough to do the whole recording. So we only recorded like 4 episodes. But I had like set it all up because they give you the questions ahead of time. And I had set it up for the Zeus one where they ask you about Zeus's relationships to mortal women. And I was like, well, this is a problem because, Zeus, he'll give you up. He'll let you down. He'll run around. He'll totally desert you.
Which are all the things you don't want.
He like makes you cry. He says goodbye. And then he tells you lies.
Also, I just realized you had your cake and eat it too, because not only did you rickroll us, you just rickrolled every person, all 20 people that listen to the show.
Well, we have a story about how I missed out on being to rickroll the world.
Mythception.
It's just so delightful. So,
The importance of play in this.
the importance of play.
Press demo button.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I've caused a lot of damage.
I don't know how to fall. I can't pivot from that.
I know.
We should just end the show right here.
Yeah, I can't
wrap
top.
Up. We all like Black Orpheus, but we think it is actually a horror movie in disguise.
Yes.
I think that actually might be.
Yes.
That's our new, like, I'm gonna
similar to the Rickroll. It is a horror movie in disguise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Magical realism horror movie.
I'm there for that.
There's one final scene before I feel like to do our due diligence that we should at least entertain before I let anyone go, because you are my prisoners. No, but
like I can leave this whenever I want.
Yeah, you're true. Yeah, it's not like I like. Rebecca's like, I could just get up and walk
You're not
out.
the boss of me,
Just
man.
walk away.
I was thinking of Malcolm in the Middle the other day too. Speaking of. But I was going to say the one scene, because I really only have one thought, that it's an observation more than anything else, but it's the most famous scene in the myth where he calls out to Eurydice and then he looks back, and then when Eurydice sort of inhabits that older woman and speaks to him, and then it was just fascinating. Well, the one thing that I was thinking about is that we never actually, and I think this is a smart decision on the movie's part, is we never hear Orpheus' song, because he's singing and people, they're like, sing to Eurydice, but we can't hear him over the candomblé, like all the everything that's happening in the ceremony. And then in the way they did that, I thought that was, I'm not sure if that's how it works in the play. I know that the candomblé ritual is original to this movie. It's not in the play, I don't think. I don't know exactly what happens in the play, but the way they work it, I mean, that's when the movie's at its most magical. And then Eurydice is speaking to him through this other woman. I don't know if you had thoughts about that. Like I said, I'm piecing it together too. I need like a film PhD to like tell me what the hell to make of this.
I think I liked the sort of suddenness of it, because I was sort of kind of waiting for it to happen. Like, oh, is she going to be there? Is she going to be behind him? Is like she herself, like the actress, going to be there or like in spirit? And then it was like we sort of didn't know also what was going on. It's like we were sort of with Orpheus in that kind of almost like feverish, like fear moment toward the end. And so I kind of like that everything sort of felt very sudden and kind of hurried, and we didn't land too much time on what he actually sings or says or anything like that. I felt it worked with the emotion for me.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think that it actually not hearing him, well, one, is that when her voice comes out, it really centers her voice, right? That it's actually not about him. It's about her trying to reach back out in some way, right? So it sort of centers her wanting to have this final moment maybe with him, this final sort of a way to communicate with him that she didn't have. And in some ways it's sort of, because she died in fear, right? And I think that this gives a moment for her to communicate to him not in fear.
Yeah.
But he can't let go of his fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that the subliminating his voice and then just allowing us to sort of read this through her. And then when we do hear his voice, it's about how I can't let you go. I can't not look. I can't, not see you. That we sort of, in some ways, because it's his pursuit of her, right? In some ways that actually leads to her death, not just him actually pulling the trigger, but the whole thing is driving her towards him, and then him driving Mira, and Mira driving Eurydice, that he can't be innocent of this, right? He can't be washed clean of this in some ways. So I think it really plays with the emotion and allows her, because she's our lens, right, for so much of the film, and we see him through her eyes. Like when we first meet him, not sure if we like him or not, right, because we see him through her fear, and then we sort of he becomes endearing to us as he becomes endearing to her, and also through the eyes of the children. Like she and the children are the sort of visual lens for us. But in this final scene, like we can't see her, but we can hear her, and we can only see him but not hear him. So I think it's a nice duality.
Yeah.
There.
For sure.
And I think Eli's absolutely right too. There's this like the way the whole thing builds the emotion of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, no, that's just yes to all the above.
I'm going to become a film critic after I finish my announcing career.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean,
Perfect.
That's the beauty of through podcasting, we can all be film critics.
Right.
That's really what that's like what this is. This is my secret. This is my project to like secretly just get my try my hand at film criticism through.
I have to say though, I really think it's much more fun to do these things in conversation than it is to sort of sit on your own and sort of like digest a film. There's so many things that I think of as I'm listening to you guys talk about the film. I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I'm like, oh, but now it makes sense. Like something clicks, right? As we sort of listen to each other. I think things like films are not meant to be digested alone. They're meant to be a communal experience. And so I think having a conversational style podcast instead of like writing your lonely screed for the New York Times or something.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is what I think one of the things I'm missing most in this pandemic, especially now, is like the theater. And just going,
I know, right?
And like it's the first. It's top of my bucket list of like the minute I'm safe to go out and everything's good. It's like I don't care what. I'll see Sonic the Hedgehog too. Like I don't care. I just want to sit in a theater with other human bodies and like communally experience a thing.
Yep.
This is my daughter and I we used to go to movies together all the time. And like the weekend before everything shut down, we went and saw Birds of Prey, right? Which was such a fun movie. And it just did not get, because of the timing of it. And because of the name, right? Because the DC universe people are just bad at marketing and stuff.
I could go on a whole thing about DC movies, but
I won't even go there.
I look like you look like the kind of guy that would have strong opinions about comic book movies.
Yeah. Birds of Prey was such a great movie, I think.
I enjoyed it. I saw it recently.
I really loved it. But that was the last thing we saw together in a theater. And so it's like, but we have that, like, we actually like sat down and watched it together again in the living room not too long ago. It's like, we watched this in the theater together. Like, it was like such a big, important memory.
Yeah, it's such a novel concept now.
And it really it truly it changes the way you experience a thing. Just like I think like, the one that's most recently I can think of was when I'm so glad I saw A Quiet Place in a theater, and I saw it in a packed theater because I think that really sold that. It was like so integral, because if I just saw it in my house, it'd be like, it's quiet. But like being in a theater of like 100 or whatever people like actively holding their breath. And I remember I went to, there was an Alamo really close to where I live, Alamo Draft House really close to where I live. And I got like some food. I got like a pizza or something. And I remember like holding the slice of pizza like 2 inches from my mouth, about to take a bite, but I can't, because there's no way I'm going to ruin this scene by like.
If you chew, it'll like.
No, and so I just like, I'm like waiting for like a minute, and like other like I have like very fond memories of like if going to like a good like a screening of a film with like a good audience is so with people.
Yeah, and I actually a film like Black Orpheus, I can just imagine an audience sort of like, because of the sort of the way it opens and that sort of the sort of communal experience it invites, because it's about communal experience, but also simultaneously about individually how people differently experience that communal sort of, whether it's a horror or a joy or whatever it is, or playfulness, or
it's all the it's
or fear, like it's all there. And so it gives you all these different emotions that you can tap into, but it is about how we function in communities, right? And so it's like, and a film like that must have been with the musical scoring and that opening scene must have just been like a really good time to see in a packed theater.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Right. So our final thesis is bring back movie theaters.
Yes.
But...
Can't wait.
It's really funny because I just participated in a 2-day conference with a bunch of historians and classes called Cathartic History, which is sort of about like, can we use the concept of catharsis as a way to sort of think about history and the writing of history? And sort of, I think now there's like, as we're talking about this, I'm sort of thinking about the movie theater, or thinking about, the sort of theater experience, right? And how we will tell the tales of, or, recall in our own minds the sort of history of this pandemic, potentially through the sort of loss of communal cathartic experience. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh.
That's fat. Yeah, that's.
I'm sorry. I went into the 9-foot side of the swimming pool on that one.
Excellent.
I I just feel that like really, really deep in my soul, and,
Yeah.
it hurts.
It's gonna be I'm thinking about how we're gonna think about it. It wraps my brain up in ways. But I need a carnival. I need a raw.
Well, we were promised in the presidential speech last night a 4th of July.
Yeah.
A normal 4th of July.
Okay.
I don't even do 4th of July, but I might do 4th of July just for fun.
Are you? I had like a social distance one, like where like basically like people in like my immediate bubble, just like my partner and like her roommate, basically, and like one friend that helped them move, and then we just had like burgers but because they're all in the French department, and most of them are French, so it was like
they're like, what?
Eat my gross food.
Yeah, no, I had a screen porch built finally after 3 years of waiting, because I didn't build it. I had the cement laid the summer we were at the American school together, Colin.
We kind of buried the lead. That's how Rebecca and I know each other. We met in Greece.
We know each other from the American school summer program.
We're an hour and like 20 minutes into the podcast.
Yeah. But I laid the cement that summer, like the summer, like right before that, the spring before that, and then I didn't build the screen porch till like during quarantine. I was like, I need a screen porch now. I can't live without it. But I was able. I have a good friend who's at a nearby college, who's a Kenyan. So I'm at Denison, and she's a Kenyan, we're like 30 minutes apart from each other. But she lives in town here with us, where we live. And because it's an outdoor space, we could hang out, and we could all be. And it's huge. It's like 14 by 20 foot screen porch.
Oh, so. Magical.
Nice.
Yeah. So we could like we get together every once in a while, just like do like snacks together, and their young son, who's like 3, like idolizes Max. Mm-hmm. My spouse, who Colin also knows because we did the school program together. But he's like, he thinks Max is like his best friend or something. Is Max going to be there? Does Max wear pajamas when he sleeps too? Yeah. So we all hung out together on the porch, and Max was like, "This was really relaxing for all of you." Like, that's because you're not best friends with a 3-year-old.
Yep. Fantastic. He should just tell the 3-year-old that he plays the guitar to make the sunrise.
Exactly.
We've all taken up the guitar over quarantine. So I've been learning the bass.
Nice. Family band?
Well, we're gonna have a family band. Ellie's doing drum. My daughter's a cellist, but she wants something a little bit more exciting. Drums. So she's actually she can pick up. Well, she's gonna be the drummer.
I was a drummer. I highly support
I got her
this
a drum pad to practice, because I have to have the basement room drywalled and insulated before I'll get the drum set in there. I don't want to add anything else into that room until it's drywalled and insulated.
My parents rejoiced when I picked percussion as my.
Yeah, right. Well, what's really distressing about my child, right, is that because she's a cellist and she's been playing the cello since she was 12 or 11 or something. I don't know, 6th grade. She's 9th grade now. And so she picks up the guitar. We have a regular guitar, regular electric guitar. We have an acoustic bass and then a regular bass. And we have a keyboard as well. I want Max to do his hair like Flock of Seagulls. And,
oh, yes. Do you like Flock of Seagulls? No, but I can tell you do.
No.
None of our students are going to get that reference.
Yeah, right. But Ellie picks up the guitar, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna like play Nirvana." Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, stop. Right? Some of us have to work it.
Fantastic.
No. It's really humbling to have a child who is smarter than you, more musical than you, and more athletic.
I have a cat who I'm pretty sure is smarter than me. I don't like it.
Yeah. But of course, she's also a Gen Z kid, right? Mm-hmm. So like, she also like keeps you honest. I have to be like, she made fun of me the other day because I texted Max with lol with a period. Well, first I say lol and not LOL, right? Which is like just like wrong. And then I use punctuation in my text, and then I put punctuation after LOL, right? Like they're like, she's like, you're almost reaching boomerness, mom. Like you just got
how insulting.
That's rough.
Right. Well, it was really funny. One of my colleagues was like, I've reached that stage in being an academic. She's a colleague in history. She's like, I reached that stage in being an academic where you can't think of words that other like regular people will understand. I need a regular word for performative. And I was like, sweetie, you don't have to manage. You don't have to worry. All the high schoolers are learning performative activism on TikTok. Like they got you. That's what they call the liberals.
That's
these
so
days.
true.
Oh
my gosh.
Hang on. I have to go. A person in a skeleton mask just walked in the room. I think I need to flee. But anyways, yeah. So before we go though, Rebecca, is there anything you want to plug out there?
Don't ask me to do any more talk. No.
Never call me again.
No, nothing to plug. I'm trying to finish 3 books right now, so I have a sabbatical in the fall. My reward for running the museum is that they granted me a sabbatical in the fall. But yeah, nothing to plug right now. Check back with me someday.
No worries.
No, I'm behind on like one man book. Like, so Max and I are doing a new source book on women in the Greek and Roman world, and we're 2 years late on that. And
that sounds like par for the course, though, right? Like,
well, I love that my editor is more concerned about the fact that I got a concussion and it impacted my ADHD, and that I then pushing me to rush and finish this book, right? Which is great. And then I'm now 8 months behind on my new Johns Hopkins book on ancient identities and their modern receptions. And now Jackie and I are going under contract with Routledge for a new textbook on understanding race and ethnicity.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and then there's the what I call it the Minograph. It's a 30,000 word historiography of the racialization of Greco-Romans in 19th and 20th century American scholarship.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
That's a lot on your plate. I'm never going to complain again.
I do it to myself, though, right? Jackie Marie and I have been doing Pomodoro sessions together. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but we sort of have a Zoom. And there's like 4, and like Matthias does it with us, Hanses does it with us, and a couple of other people. So we sort of keep each other honest, but Jackie and I, our goal is to help each other say no.
I think it's important. It's like,
Yes. Very important.
But I'm happy to say yes to, like, this is the biggest problem. I can never say no to grad students and undergraduate students. Like, I just finished doing a couple of days ago, I did a classics day at a 7th through 12th grade school, right? Like, how do you say no to kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope I had a great time. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, this was fun. And hopefully no one gets mad at the riff roll.
Maybe. Well, if they do, they'll yell at us, so you're fine.
But we totally set it up. If they didn't know it was coming.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Is excellent. Yeah, and open invitation if you ever want to come back. If something ever comes up and you're like, I got a thing.
I've been working my way through a bunch of anime, so we'll have to have but let me know when you want to get around to Tear My Room. I can mail you my copy and lend you.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Actually, we should. Eli and I we're at a point where we need to like schedule a couple of things, but.
Yeah. I have volume 1 of the manga as well.
Awesome.
In English.
I know that you can get there's the animes on Amazon, but it's really short.
The anime is on Amazon, but the live action film is harder to get.
Yeah, that's the one I've been having trouble getting.
My favorite part of the live action film is the representation of Adrian.
Oh, really? Don't spoil it for us.
I know.
But my favorite part, my actual favorite part though, is that the guy who plays the main character, right? He's Japanese, right? But he won the Japanese equivalent of an Oscar for this film.
Really?
And at his acceptance speech, he was like, just once, he's like, I'm so grateful for this Oscar, but this is the second Oscar I've won, and just once I would actually like to win an Oscar for playing a non-European.
Oh no!
Yeah, that's like a point in the movie where he's ostensibly like a Roman or whatever, and he's like, everyone looks.
He's Japanese.
Yeah.
He's actually Japanese.
Yeah.
He's like also tall. He's like 6'3" or something like this. Mm-hmm. But he always gets cast as the European.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
That's pretty funny.
So in this film, he's Italian.
Fantastic.
Hilarious.
All right, I'll see you guys around.
Yeah, but thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.